Czechast, a podcast in English about Czech and Moravian society, history, culture and economy.
Hello and welcome to Czechast, the podcast in English about all things Czech. I'm Vít Pohanka, and in this episode we're talking about something that's been debated for years and has finally become reality. For the first time in Czech history, citizens living abroad will be able to vote by mail in the upcoming parliamentary elections. A practical change, yes, but as you'll hear, it's also a deeply emotional and symbolic one. One of the people who helped push this initiative forward is Julia O'Donovan, a Czech American who normally lives in Oregon. But we spoke while she was visiting her homeland in the foothills of the giant mountains, or Podkrkonoší.
You know what? This is about the right to vote. It's not about who you are going to vote, but it's about the ability to vote. So I always kind of brought it up to the original idea of, we cannot vote. Let's just make it possible. It is your own personal decision who you want to vote for. So we always keep it at that level.
So, Julia is part of a network of Czech citizens abroad who have been campaigning for years to make mail-in voting a reality, not for partisan reasons, but out of a belief that every citizen should have the right to participate. Another voice in that effort is Marta McCabe, based in North Carolina. She's been active in raising awareness about this issue in the United States and helped build momentum among Czech communities overseas.
It's about belonging. It's about us Czechs living abroad feeling that we belong to the Czech Republic, that we are citizens, that we are part of that country the way as everybody else. It is also the other way around, that the Czech Republic sort of extends their hands and feels more connected with people living abroad.
And political scientist Petr Just, who teaches at Metropolitan University in Prague, sees this as a victory for civil society, a moment when citizen engagement directly led to legislative change.
From my point of view, or from my perspective, I can only applaud to this kind of civic engagement that led to the conclusion, or to that positive conclusion, when the mail-in voting or postal voting was adopted in the Czech legal system.
So, in today's Czechast, we'll hear from the people who helped make this change happen, those who will benefit from it, and what it says about democracy, identity and belonging in 21st century Czechia.
Czechast, a podcast in English about all things Czech. Whether you're an English-speaking expat living in Czechia and Slovakia, or a descendant of the Czechs, Moravians and Slovaks who left for a better life in America, Australia, Britain or Canada so long ago that you don't speak the language of the old country, this podcast in English is for you.
Julia, if I turn to you, what personally motivates you to get actively involved in the campaign for introducing postal voting for Czechs living abroad?
Okay, thank you for the question. I have been thinking about it a lot, and it basically goes back to all the way to me being a refugee and then regaining my citizenship again. So I defected from Czechoslovakia in 1984. I was very young. And by the time 1989 came up, I was, of course, pleasantly surprised, but I was not done with my college studies. So I decided to stay a little longer, finish my school, and I also applied for the U.S. citizenship. That was briefly before 1989. So in early 90s, I gained my U.S. citizenship. By gaining the U.S. citizenship, I lost my Czech citizenship, which was very, very sad. In 2014, I was able to regain the Czech citizenship. And with that occurrence, I just kind of really had it was a very powerful experience, actually. You know, losing your citizenship and then regaining it is something that doesn't happen every day. you don't take things for granted anymore. So I kind of assumed responsibility and decided I'm going to be more involved with like political life and everything else. And it kind of coincided with my parents having more and more health issues as they were getting older, and I spent more time here, longer periods of time.
When you say here, you mean Czechia?
In the Czech Republic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So let's see. In 2018, I was really starting to be very involved in the political scene, and when I decided to vote in 2018, and I lived in Oregon most of the time, but here again, partially here, I realized that the process is virtually impossible, that I would have to go to Los Angeles, and it's 1,600 kilometers. And with 2 rounds of presidential elections, I would have to go to Los Angeles 2 times, and I have young children then. So I had to, it was very frustrating, and I decided, I cannot do it. It's not doable for me. So, however, that triggered a whole different thing, set, events in the form of that I decided to design so-called Oregon initiatives, in which I'm asking the Czech government to simplify the process of voting for abroad. I mentioned the correspondence voting, and that I collected about close to 100 signatures from all the friends that I knew had the chance, had passport and were able to vote. I sent it to Jan Hamáček, I think. And within 2 months, I got an answer. They basically thanked me and they said, thank you for the valuable input. Correspondence voting is on our list of things to do. And that was basically it. However, as we know, nothing happened. By 2020, I connected through through Facebook. I came across the group Chceme volit distančně, and I approached Darša Straková.
In Brussels, in Belgium?
In Brussels, yes. And she asked me if I would like to join them. And I said, definitely. So by 2020, all these smaller initiatives basically connected under a larger initiative called Chceme volit distančně. We were more coordinated. The initiative approached the Czech government again, and we have a positive result now. But until then, we had to travel long distances to vote. Once I voted here, I happened to be here after my dad passed away. It was the year of presidential elections, so I was able to vote directly from here.
If I may turn now to Marta. Marta, what motivated you? I mean, obviously, judging from your surname or second name, you married to an American, I suppose. So let me ask you slightly provocatively, why bother, I mean, you can vote in the US, I suppose. So why do you need to vote in Czechia?
Thank you for the question. So I would like to be able to vote in the Czech elections as a citizen of the Czech Republic. Czech Republic is my home. That's where I grew up. That's where I come back to. That's where my family lives. So this is a country that I care dearly about. Of course, I care about the place that I live in currently. And I also care about Africa and other places on earth. But I am a citizen of the Czech Republic, and I would like to be able to express how I feel about what's going on and help decide the future direction of the country. So that is why bother? And it means for me, of course, traveling to Washington, D.C. So it is a difficult kind of long trip. But, in a way, I came to realize that this is an issue over time and kind of gradually, because the first time you can't participate in an election, you just say, well, it just didn't work out this time. Maybe next time I'll go. It's far, but I'll make the effort. Next time comes and it still doesn't work. You have 3 children, you don't have the time. So it was over time that I realized that this is not just that
doesn't work out this time. This is an issue that needs to be solved in a more systematic way.
Let me just be a little personal in this, because I think I traveled via Charlotte several times by car, traveling from Washington, D.C. But remind me, how many hours does it take to drive to Washington, D.C.?
If you drive and you observe the speed limit, it would be about 5 hours. And that's not taking into consideration, the traffic that can happen. So you want to plan around that. You don't want to be coming into Washington, D.C. anytime people are going to work or leaving work, because that would add additional time. So it is technically doable in one day there and back, but a long drive.
But not easy. Yeah, definitely not. Petr Just, political scientist, if I may turn to you. We've just heard, in very briefly, 2 stories of Czech women who still feel that they are Czech, they want to participate in the political process. What do you think about that as a political scientist?
I have to admit that I probably haven't seen any such intensive and long-run campaigns for achieving a certain legislative goal, although we are once in a while witnesses of several interest groups trying to lobby, trying to persuade the MPs or the authorities to initiate some legislative changes or to pass some legislative changes. They usually refer to the areas like education, social affairs, healthcare. But when we are talking about the, let's say, high politics, when we are talking about the issues related to constitution, constitutional rights, to elections, electoral systems, electoral rights, this is kind of rare. So all these activities, I would say they are very rare, the activity. And again, I repeat, a long-run activity and very intensive long-run activity when the people who had the Czech citizenship, who complied with the constitutional criteria to have the right to vote, but the right to vote was somehow limited to what we've just heard. Usually, the distance that needed to be taken in order to get to the place of the voting, get to the polls. I wonder how many Czechs in Czechia, living in Czechia, would actually sacrifice going 5 hours there and 5 hours back just to cast a vote. So this is a big sacrifice from the people living in, especially the countries with a huge territory, where you really need to take either a long almost a road trip for several hours or sometimes even more days, or if you want to cut the time a bit, you have to take a plane, which is then financially demanding on the other side. So either time demanding or financially demanding, or sometimes a combination of both. This is something that I feel that was one of the motivation factors, besides the feeling that they are Czechs or they feel Czech and they do care about what is happening in Czechia. So these were the main motivations, as I observe it, which were behind all these initiatives and activities. So from my point of view, or from my perspective, I can only applaud to this kind of civic engagement that led to the conclusion, or to that positive conclusion, when the mail-in voting or postal voting was adopted in the Czech legal system.
What sort of obstacles did you face when dealing with the Czech authorities? Because you were dealing with the Czech authorities and the Czech institutions. So, Marta, I mean, did you see kind of acceptance on the side of Czech authorities? Was there a willingness, to help?
I would say that there was always willingness from some players on the political scene, but then there was also a huge unwillingness from others. So it was really about finding the right time and place where the majority of all these players would be thinking positively about this law that would allow voting by mail. And what I would say is that there seems to be a sort of a view in the Czech Republic that people living abroad will only vote a certain way, and it would only benefit certain parties. And perhaps the other parties act on this sort of stereotype, which I don't think is founded on anything real, and thus are opposed to this law. So that is something that I found that it was difficult to name what are facts, what facts are, and what the reality is. And so a lot of action and decision making seems to be based on sort of feelings how things might turn out, but not based in reality. And if there is time to mention one more, something that felt was kind of surprising to me is how opposed the general public in the Czech Republic is to this idea, which also makes it, of course, more difficult for any political party in the Czech Republic to put that on their program and stand behind this and make that their goal, because they know that their main voters, the most votes they will get will be from the Czech Republic, of course. So that's what they are talking to. So that's the second one. And again, the whole purpose of this is that all of the political scene will look outside as well, because when we don't have a practical way to participate in elections, we are not going to be taken into consideration in any programs that the political parties develop. So this is a little bit of everything, but a lot of lessons learned.
Could I add something, if you don't mind?
Yes.
Is it okay? Yes. I just realized that, Martha, you're completely right. I have the same reactions from some people that I know. Most of them are open-minded, and once they get to know me, they figure out that I do care about our homeland, and I know maybe more than an average person about this country. And the interesting thing, I'm not sure why that is, why they feel this way, because really, when you tell them the statistics that out of the 27 countries of the European Union, we were one of the 4 who did not have the right to vote. Besides, France has some kind of limited voting access, as I understand, and Croatia doesn't have it, and Malta, right? So once you tell them this kind of statistic, they kind of go, well, they sort of consider it. But I think it's just something that's new, and eventually they'll hopefully accept it. But it's unpleasant at this point.
If I may turn now to Petr Just again, because I saw you kind of nodding your head about a lot of things. Let me just insert my input a little bit. Having spent 3 years in Poland, I think it's totally unthinkable that the Polish political representation would, in one way or another, try to limit the access of Poles living abroad, Polonia, as they call them, to the election process in Poland. And I just wonder, we are neighborly nation, we are very close, yet in this respect, there seems to be this kind of opposition, or there used to be opposition at least on the part of the public, not just some political parties.
Well, Poland is a special case, I would say, because the Polish diaspora is quite huge, both in the United States as well as in the other countries as well. And not only that this diaspora is important size-wise, it's also important by its very coordinated and strong pressure. So sometimes what I was witnessing when I met some Czechs in the United States, for example, during my own stays in the United States, they sometimes lack a certain way of coordinated processes when they wanted to push for something. This initiative was rare, as I said at the beginning. That was a coordinated issue and coordinated activity. But regarding other activities, regarding representation of some minority interests, minority rights, I think that the Czechs along the United States, they more or less act independently. I mean, independent communities, independent associations, and there is very little coordination. Again, I repeat, with the exception of this particular issue that we are discussing here at this moment. And you're right, the Czech society in general has been showing a certain skepticism towards the Czechs living abroad, skepticism how much they should be involved in the decision-making processes. We have heard throughout the decades after 1989, we can already talk about decades because it's been more than 30 years, we have heard many arguments against involving them or against bringing them to decision-making processes, usually arguing that they don't pay the taxes, they live across the pond, and they do not care about what's happening here. But usually the people who are saying this, they didn't know the situation of Czechs living there. When I came as a 16-year-old high school student to Nebraska, and I've met many of the Czechs living there, actually that was for me also for the first time when I saw that all these arguments were actually false, that the people, the Czechs, they are very active. I have never seen so many folk costumes in Czechia like I saw in Wilbur, Nebraska during the annual Wilbur Czech Festival. So it also opened eyes to me, although I was at that time not interested much in the politics. So in that politics, I didn't take it politically, but it kind of enriched me also in my view on how we should approach the Czechs living abroad, that we should really understand the situation of them. We should not just access them or look at them through some stereotypes that they are cut out or cut away from the events happening in Czechia. They follow the news. They follow the movie productions. They have clubs where they show the Czech movies which are even newly released Czech movies. So this is something that still in Czechia people do not see enough. That they do not see clearly that the fact that somebody lives on the other side of the world, on the other hemisphere, does not necessarily mean that he has no touch with this country, culture, history, politics, and other aspects of the life. And unfortunately, this is what politicians' approaches are based on. When they see that people don't care, then the politicians, or some of the politicians, they follow this suit because they say, why should we promote some ideas? Why should we promote some policy platforms here in Czechia, the platforms that people do not care about or people do not wish that we would care about? So it's interconnected, this public approach and the political approach. Although I hope, or I believe and I hope, this approach is slowly but continuously changing, and this adoption of mail-in voting may be understood as the first step towards improving of the relations of Czechia as the country, as well as the Czech society towards the Czech diaspora.
If I may now turn to Marta and Julia again, I suppose, your initiative was totally impartial. From my own experience, it is that Czechs who might still be voting and who had been in the United States for a longer period of time, there's a larger, I think, probability that they would be for MAGA, for Donald Trump, whereas the younger generation are different. Is this just a wrong presumption, or would you say it was that? But I suppose it didn't in any way kind of compute in your thinking when you started the campaign.
Well, I would just say that the whole purpose of the campaign is not to support a specific political party. We have been clear about this from the beginning. It is a campaign to enable Czech citizens abroad to exercise their right to vote, to have the practical ability to actually cast the vote without having to fly thousands of miles across the continent. So, not sure if I'm answering the question right now, but we definitely were not thinking that we need to do this to help someone and harm someone else. But we, at the same time, we really don't know how people would vote. What we saw is we saw results, let's say, from the presidential elections or parliamentary elections. We can see the results from abroad. The issue with that could be that these results right now represent the people who live in the big cities. So in Washington, D.C., in Los Angeles, in Chicago, and New York, right? New York City. So it is only logical, and it mirrors the typical results from elections, probably in the Czech Republic, big cities, where little different results than the countryside. It is similar with the results of the elections in the United States. The Democratic Party always takes the lead in big cities. The Republican Party usually is much stronger in the country. So right now, what we're actually doing, we're allowing people who might even more likely be for the current opposition parties, which is interesting, and I don't think it's been really brought up. So anyway, it's just a thought.
Julia, would you like to add something to that?
I just want to say that I live and operate in a blue state that is more overwhelmingly democratic. However, I have to say I have a lot of friends who are very conservative, a lot of Christian friends who basically, I know that they voted, for example, for this current government. And I am well aware that given the right to vote, they will be voting along the same lines, during the Czech elections. And just even at the very beginning, as I started to promote the initiative, the very first Oregon initiative, we had that conversation. And I always just said, just like Martha said, I go, you know what? This is about the right to vote. It's not about who you are going to vote, but it's about the ability to vote. So I always kind of brought it up to the original idea of, we cannot vote. Let's just make it possible. It is your own personal decision who you want to vote for. So we always keep it at that level. But I think Martha is correct. It could be, it's going to be just super interesting to see how it's going to reflect and how it's going to connect with, like, in the case of the United States, with the political landscape in the US, how it's going to connect basically to the political landscape here in the Czech Republic.
Let me ask you ladies again. I mean, is everything going according to the plan when it comes to registration, as far as you know? Are there any issues with communicating about the Czech authorities, institutions abroad, to get the registration? We are now talking in mid-May. What does it look like to you now, Marta?
So at this point, people can both sign into the register of voters in this country in which they live. They can also ask or apply for the voting by mail, which means they need to inform their embassy or the consulate general that they are interested in voting by mail, so that they can receive the envelopes which they will use. Anyway, do we know about issues? We don't really know about issues yet. We are pretty sure we will hear about them. But what we say is go talk to the embassy or the consulate general with which you would need to communicate anyway, to make sure that you send all the needed documents and that you don't miss any details. For example, if you want to sign up into the list of voters and send it by mail, you need to make sure your signature is
Notarized.
Perfect. Thank you, Julia. Yeah, so the signature is notarized. So I actually have heard one example in which somebody sent in this request, but it was returned to them because the signature was not notarized. So, it's going to be a learning curve. It's something new, so we all will have to learn. And I guess the question is how clear the instructions will be how swift the communication will be. If something doesn't go right, will the voter be notified so that they can apply the right way? But it's going to be mostly about communication and clear instructions, and we hope it will work out well.
Julia, would you like to add something to this? What do you think about that?
Sure, I'd love to add something. So I am an educator, and my first reaction to the whole voting process was that of a slight, just being overwhelmed a little bit by looking at the whole process. But then I was thinking about it, and I broke it into 5 basic steps using the diagram that was available from Chceme volit distančně, and what's that website? It's Můj domov, můj hlas. I combined those 2 diagrams, and I used the opportunity to go to the Czech Easter celebration of the Czech School of Portland, and I made a big poster, drew a highway, every curve was numbered 1 through 5, and I basically talked to people. This is, I think, what it comes down to, just the personal connection, and kind of dispelling the myth that it might be a little too complicated, because it is not. You just have to take one step at a time. It's pretty clear. And yes, we're going through this the first time, but it's very, very doable, and we're doing it all together. And if we support one another, we'll do it. So as Marta said, right now, we know the elections will be October 3rd and 4th. Therefore, we can combine step number 1 and number 2, which is registering on the list of register of voters and then requesting the materials. So these are our 2 steps out of 5. And then we wait until we get the materials, and then we go to the next step. But I don't want to overwhelm people. I feel like I am notifying them about 1 step at a time. What do we do now? And we are sending it on email through the Czech School of Portland. I'm putting it on the website in Portland, Oregon. I'm putting this on the website in Seattle. I'm putting on the website in Czech women in the USA. So I hopefully it'll work. We'll see. It's our first shot.
You are listening to Czechast, a podcast in English about all things Czech. I'm Vít Pohanka, your host, and today we're exploring the story behind Czechia's first ever postal vote, a milestone for the country's democracy and for Czechs living abroad.
I wonder, after the elections, there will likely be a number of invalid votes because some
kind of technical mistakes.
Some mistakes will happen. Yeah. And the question is, is that only related to the voting by mail? I am assuming there is a certain percentage of invalid votes even in the Czech Republic when people put in the incorrect papers into the envelope or put more than one, depending how they fill it in. So again, some of these things are being now discussed as a potential hazard, as a potential, problem, but they also happen in the voting in the Czech Republic to a degree.
Petr, if I may turn to you again now. Obviously, postal vote is a possibility in many countries outside of the country. I just wonder, I cannot vote by post as a Czech citizen living in Czechia, right?
Right. If you are on the Czech soil, if you are on the Czech territory, then you have to take this action physically.
And go there, of course, and go physically there.
But you do not have to make this registration process. This is done automatically in the city hall of the city where you are registered as a permanent resident, so you don't need to make any step before voting.
Why is that? Why couldn't I decide, okay, I want to vote ahead of the time like many Americans do, and they don't have to be soldiers in some foreign bases. There's probably not a political, consensus. There's not a political will in Czechia. Is there?
I will now be a devil's advocate, because I myself personally would be in favor of adopting the same method. in Czechia. However, let's maybe take the steps slowly. We are now quite happy, if I can say this way, that the Czechs abroad achieved this milestone in their long-run campaigns and long-run efforts to get the possibility to vote by mail. And I'm a little bit afraid that if too much would be added to it, if that amendment that was passed would include more changes, if it would include, for example, allowing the postal voting within the territory of Czechia, that could actually endanger the fate of the entire bill, of the entire amendment. So this is why I think it's been a strategic thing that the politicians decided to take the step number one, to allow the people living abroad to cast their vote with this postal way or postal mean. But I believe that we are a step towards other changes that might include also the postal voting within the territory of Czechia. Actually, this has been discussed 5 years ago during the COVID pandemics, because when the COVID broke up in 2020, we had, at the fall of 2020, there were Senate and I believe it was regional elections. 2021, the elections to the Chamber of Deputies were approaching, but still there were certain restrictions and restrictive measures regarding the quarantine, regarding the social distancing, regarding the disinfections and other means that were supposed to prevent from the spread of the COVID. So there were at that time thoughts whether to allow the postal voting as they, for example, even within the territory of Czechia, as for example they did in case of Polish presidential elections in 2020, when actually the Poles were allowed to cast their votes in domestic elections, also using these mail votes in order to prevent from the spread of the COVID. At the end, you probably know that the solution which was taken in Czechia was a certain ad hoc solution, that there were these special polling stations, actually drive-in polling stations, that the people actually drove by car, and just from the car they casted their vote without even exiting the car. And the election board members, they were there in the full gears, taking the votes from the people. That it was an ad hoc emergency solution. But I know that at that time they were considering whether to adopt like a bit long-term procedure that would allow for any time in future, in case anything similar would happen, that there would be again some restrictions, so that which obviously the health is the most important thing, so which would allow, even in the times of the health-related restrictions, would still allow people to exercise their constitutional right to vote. But as I said, let's not get ahead of us a little too much. Let's now take the fact that we adopted the mail-in voting for the Czechs living abroad, and I believe it's sooner or later could also come to Czechia to vote this way also within the Czech territory.
Julie and Marta, why is it a good thing that you can vote by post, and what you shouldn't forget, whether you are a Czech living in Switzerland, Australia or the US, if you wanted to take part in the election process and take part in the political life of your home country?
Okay, I'll say a few things. So for me, this whole discussion and this whole project, almost to say, to enable this right for Czechs abroad to vote, it's about belonging. It's about us Czechs living abroad feeling that we belong to the Czech Republic, that we are citizens, that we are part of that country the way as everybody else. It is also the other way around, that the Czech Republic sort of extends their hands and feels more connected with people living abroad. We would call it diaspora, which really means people of the country living abroad, not others, just people, us, some of us living abroad. Now, the difference between now and, let's say, the 19th century, or maybe even the time of the Cold War, is a long time ago. When people left, they packed up all they had, they got on the boat, and they went to Texas or some faraway land, and they were pretty sure they were never coming back. It's just, that was a new beginning. It was a way to sort of in an imaginary way, cut yourself away from the country, and then of course keep the language and make kolache, sure. But in a way, starting a whole new life. Today, we live in a world in which we don't have to do this. We are still part of where we're coming from. We're also part of something else, and there is no either or. It's really us belonging in two places and keeping and maintaining those relationships and belonging in both places. So for me, it's important personally to be able to be involved in the country where all my family lives, country that I go back and visit, and a country that I care about and I hope to come back to one day. Again, I think this is a great success after so many years. We'll just see how it goes, and we hope a lot of people will participate. I'm assuming those who are interested. As we mentioned, some people are not interested and they're not going to vote, like in the Czech Republic. But for those who are, they probably already know. They probably already are taking the steps, and they will be voting. So I'm hoping it'll be a lot of us, and we will see in October.
Thank you so much, Marta. And now, Julia.
I think, I'm going to repeat a lot what Marta said. I'll try to add some more. Basically, I want to say to everyone who is out there and hesitant about voting, I just want to say, get up and go and vote. This was a very difficult process. It took decades. Now it's done. It's not that difficult. Do not be afraid. There are always people you can ask. There are resources you can check and find out what to do. I totally agree with Martha. I am the generation who left during the Cold War. When I was leaving, it was pretty much maybe forever. And just the fact that I'm able to come back, be here with my family, with my friends, I think that's amazing. And the world is getting smaller. We are all more connected. And I realized that this is a very historical moment, that we are the first generation ever that manages to be connected to the old country. Our children are able to speak our native language. We have Czech schools. We have all kinds of groups that, connect us in our common interests. We celebrate our Czech Easter, Mikuláš, all these things. So why not be connected to our old country like other countries can be connected to? Why would we be different than any other member of the EU? We are no worse. We are just as good, maybe better. So please get up and go vote.
Thank you so much. That was Julia, and Petr. You have the possibility as well to say a few words.
I will also take it as the recommendation to go to vote. Of course, not recommendation whom to vote for, but again, I take it from the political science perspective, because in my opinion, the turnout will determine how seriously the Czech politicians will actually take care about the issues related to the Czechs living abroad. The higher turnout, the more the politicians will be forced to actually care about what's happening abroad, what's happening in the Czech communities abroad. If they see the low turnout, it will actually make a case for those who said don't adopt the mail-in voting. You see, they don't care. They didn't go to the polls. So going to the polls will actually prove them wrong. It will prove wrong those who argued that the Czechs living abroad do not care. If you go to polls, or if they go to polls, they will show they care, and they will make politicians to care about the state of Czech communities around the world.
You've been listening to Czechast, the podcast about all things Czech in English. In this episode, we've heard from Julia O'Donovan, Marta McCabe, and political scientist Petr Just from the Metropolitan University of Prague about the long road to postal voting for Czechs living abroad and why it matters so much, not just politically, but personally. If you'd like to hear more stories like this, visit us at radio.cz. That's where you'll find full episodes, articles, and the latest updates from Czechia and beyond. And if you have comments, questions, or suggestions for future episodes, we'd love to hear from you. Just write to us at english@radio.cz. Thank you for listening. I'm Vít Pohanka, and until next time, take care, stay connected, stay curious, and naslyšenou.
Czechast, a podcast in English about all things Czech. Whether you're an English-speaking expat living in Czechia and Slovakia, or a descendant of the Czechs, Moravians and Slovaks who left for a better life in America, Australia, Britain or Canada so long ago that you don't speak the language of the old country, this podcast in English is for you.